From the Huntington Library, Art Museum, and Botanical Gardens, this is Here and Now at the Huntington. I'm Giovana Romano Sanchez. Today, we dig into the archives to explore old recipes and how, in the middle of a pandemic, cooking is connecting us with one another, as well as with different places and times. When the COVID-19 pandemic exploded, I did what many of us did. I stayed home. But unlike all my friends and family, I didn't start baking bread. In fact, when I realized I was going to have to cook more, I was anticipating a terrible defeat. I don't really like cooking, and I don't know why. My mom back in Brazil is a great cook, and she tried hard to teach me the basics. I did learn a few things. I can fry an egg and make pasta, but I've never really come to enjoy it as she does. Now, doing research for this episode changed my perspective a little. Because, historically speaking, things used to be much more difficult. In the 1800s, for example, people had to churn their own butter, salt and smoke their own meat, and cook over a wood fire. Or, more to the point, women had to do most of this. And it was serious work. They were held responsible for men's well-being. And if men thought their food was bad or bland or cold, they were in trouble. For example, the author of The Young Housekeeper's Friend, a recipe book from 1870, said that, quote, "Every woman is invested with a great degree of power over the happiness and virtue of others," end quote. And in another book from the same period called Jenny June's American Cookery, the author even goes so far to say that bad cooking is a crime, and that, quote, "a woman convicted of it ought to be arraigned for manslaughter," end quote. Oof, I'm glad I escaped that. Because there was so much pressure to cook well, cookbooks and family recipes were highly valued. And there were different genres of cookbooks. Some were put together by religious groups. Others were compiled and sold to raise funds for community organizations. And there were the personal recipe books, the ones housewives kept in their kitchen, with handwritten comments and pages stained with sauce.
They're filled with some of the most wonderful recipes and memories.
This is Shelly Crescent, a rare book cataloger at the Huntington. She knows all about old cookbooks.
My favorites are probably the cookbooks that combine recipes with a memoir.
The Huntington has a vast archive of materials related to the history of cooking, including the Cranston collection, which consists of nearly 5,000 British and American cookbooks from the 18 and 1900s. And Shelley cataloged all of them.
Yes, every book.
She says it was one of the most fun things she ever got to do.
It was like a treasure hunt. I never knew what I was going to find in the next book. Maybe I'd find some old advertisements, lots of handwritten recipes, people stuffed letters, envelopes, prescriptions, just anything.
Shelley says she learned a lot from those books.
Not just new recipes and types of food, but cooking techniques.
And she incorporated some of those in her own cooking. But she needed to make some adaptations.
The challenge, I think, with the older recipes are the non-standard directions. For instance, they'll say, take butter the size of an egg or use a teacup of milk. And some of the older ones direct you to place a dish actually closer or further from the fire.
When I asked Shelley what cooking those old recipes mean to her, she said,
"They say something about who we were and who we are. They're a part of our social fabric."
I think we can all see this right now. Images of food are a staple of social media, and online cooking tutorials have become increasingly popular. A recent study found that 54% of Americans say they are cooking more since the start of the pandemic, and 75% said they became more confident in the kitchen. And I know, people are cooking more because they're kind of forced to. But we are not only seeing more cooking, we are seeing more people making things from scratch. Of course, this is not a totally new phenomenon. And a few years ago, it caught the attention of food critic Patric Kuh.
I was working as a restaurant critic, and I was seeing on restaurant menus all these handmade foods. Chefs were making vinegar. They were all churning their own butter. I mean, what would make a chef churn their own butter and culture it and all that? Well, because it just tasted better.
Patric explored the topic in his book, Finding the Flavors We Lost, From Bread to Bourbon, How Artisans Reclaimed American Food. As part of his research, he read through old cookbooks in the Cranston collection. And he found that before the industrialization of the American food system in the 20th century, American cooking was full of vitality.
Full of regional aspects, full of handcrafted aspects. And you saw just, wow, New England food is different from Tennessee food, and that's different from California food, and that's different from Texas food. And California itself is this incredible mixture of cultures, of climates, of raw ingredients. And then industrialization came along and changed it. Massive industrial companies came in and said, hey, all of America is going to eat the same.
Just to be clear, Patric is not criticizing things like ketchup or chocolate bars. What he is doing is identifying a new effort to find flavors that are not in supermarkets. Flavors that require time and dedication to be produced.
There's a bit of a rediscovery of some of the skills, of artisan skills.
And that's also what we are seeing during the pandemic.
I look at Instagram pictures and everybody's so proud of the bread they're baking, and they show you the bread when it comes out of the oven, and then they cut it in half. I believe it's called the crumb shot, and you see how beautiful the crumb is in the bread. And I understand that.
That is the beauty of making something by hand.
You've made this, you've watched it rise when mixing the yeast. You've punched it down, you've let it rise again, you've formed it, you put it into the oven at the right temperature, and wow, next thing, 45 minutes later, out comes this beautiful loaf of bread. And, frankly, even if it's not beautiful, even if it didn't rise, you were making something by hand, and you can cut it, and you can put some butter on it, and you'll be really happy.
After talking to Patric, I was convinced and decided to give it a try. So I asked Shelley to pick up a recipe from an old cookbook for me.
What did you think about the Apple pocketbooks?
Yes, that would work.
I would like to do that one because, it'll be fun for the kids to do, and it's pretty darn easy.
The recipe is from a book called Grandma's Cooking by Alan Keller. It was written in 1955. Keller put together his grandmother's recipes and filled the book with his memories of farm life in eastern Connecticut.
Let's see.
Tell me a little bit about it.
I tried it, and basically it's a little purse. It's like a little tiny apple pie, and you make the filling and you make a pastry crust, and it's kind of like a little apple pie empanada. So should I just read the recipe out?
Yeah.
Okay. The ingredients: 3/4 of a cup of dark brown sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, 3 tablespoons of flour, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 cup of water, 2 tablespoons of butter.
Saucepan mix brown sugar, cinnamon, flour, salt. Let me fast forward a bit.
How's it going?
That's my partner, Mike. It's actually not going very well. Can you come help me?
Why?
So
I have a little,
I don't know how this was supposed to look like.
Can I see? Sorry. It's supposed to be a triangle. Sure, it'll be delicious.
Okay, we have two.
Can you describe
I'll
it
have it.
for the audience?
It looks. Okay, it looks like a mountain of sand with caramel lava. Can you describe it?
It kind of looks like something like leftover after surgery.
No, it's not that bad, Mike.
No.
After taking the pockets out of the oven, I kind of understood what Patrick was saying about feeling the joy of having made something from scratch. And even though my Apple Pocketbooks looked like something between a pile of sand and leftovers from surgery, they tasted really good. And the taste brought back a memory. It reminded me of the apple pie that my grandma used to make. It was a special dish, but one she made often. And my mom inherited that recipe. So I called her.
Oi, Fi!
Oi, mamãe. To say I cooked a different apple pie. Liguei para te contar uma coisa.
Que bom. Conte.
Eu fiz uma tortinha de maçã.
Uau!
She was surprised and said that it means I must be happy. That night, my mom and I ended up having a long conversation about my grandma and how we used to hang out in her kitchen for hours. We talked about the delicious dishes she used to make. And for a few minutes, I forgot about the pandemic. I was transported back to Brazil, to my childhood, to familiar flavors and feelings. And maybe those Apple Pocketbooks must have done the same for Alan Keller, the man who wrote Grandma's Cooking. The book's subtitle is Memories of a New England Country Kitchen and 200 Original Recipes for Joyous Eating. For Keller, recipes were a way to connect with loved ones, with places, and with times past. Just as they are for us today. This was the third episode of Here and Now at the Huntington. You can find the full recipe for the Apple Pocketbooks in our episode notes. Thanks for listening and stay well.